as we take on our Hebrew word diary. Today we're starting word number 43. No, word number 44 actually is where we up to today. And I'd like to welcome everybody. Good morning, shalom. Today we're learning the grace after meals. I'm Rabbi David Vigler, just waiting for everything to load. We're going through the grace after meals, the benching, to the point that we'll be able to properly understand. We want to properly understand the grace after meals. We've already learned 43 words in our Hebrew word diaries. And the goal of the Hebrew word diary is that you should write down the Hebrew word in the front of a flashcard and the English word on the back of a flashcard so that you can flash through the cards to the point that you're able to slowly but surely engrave them, embed them into your memory, into your mind's eye, so that every time you see those roots, you will be very comfortable. You'll be very, very comfortable with the meaning of those words, right? So Hebrew is not rocket science. This is the key here today. The key, the basis of this Hebrew reading prayer meditation class is that we do this on Thursday. It's actually very much easier than English. English has no rhyme or reason. Look at the word rhyme, R-H-Y-M-E. Look at the word reason, R-E-A-S-O-N. It has no connection to anything else. But in Hebrew, the word for reason is the same word for taste. When you taste something, it's called a ta'am, T-A-A-M, ta'am. And when you understand something, it's called a ta'am, T-A-A-M, tet, mem. The reason that the two words, that the two meanings of the same exact word for logic, understanding, and taste, is because when you understand something, you give it flavor. It comes to life. It's no longer bland and boring. It's now tasty and delicious. When you understand something, when it makes sense to you, you've shed light upon something, it's now a whole different experience, just like when you're able to taste the food that you're eating. So that's what we're doing here, is an attempt to understand 100 Hebrew words. Can you join me on this challenge? I encourage you very much to review these classes. You'll find them all at jewishgardens.com/spiritual. That's jewishgardens.com/spiritual, where you can go through all the first 43 words we've already learned on our quest to reach 100 Hebrew words, so that you know how to read them, you can understand them, and you even will be able to meditate upon their deeper meaning within the context of prayer and spirituality. I'd like to welcome Lucy Brown and Mickey, as well as Elaine. These are the people that I know are there, and it's lovely to see you. I'd like to remind everybody that tonight at 8 o'clock we have a special class. Shalom, Marty. Tonight at 8 o'clock we have a special class on Mashiach, on the coming of Mashiach. It's a 5-week series beginning tonight at 8 o'clock at facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. That's facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. Tonight we are launching that series on Mashiach. It's all about the details of who Mashiach is, what we believe, and more importantly, what we don't believe, all happening tonight at 8 o'clock on facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. We hope that you'll join us there. And without much further ado, I'm going to get straight into our next word. So we're learning through, good morning, Rob. We're learning the grace after meals. The goal here is, grace after meals, we learned it in last week's Torah portion, is a biblical mitzvah. It's a biblical commandment, one of the 613 commandments, to bench after we eat. What does bench mean, by the way? Have you ever thought about that word? We benching. What does bench mean? Bench is a Yiddish word. To bench means to bless. We bench our kids on a Friday night. We bench our kids Erev Yom Kippur. We bench on food before we eat, and we bench on food after we eat. We bench who? We bench God. We bench God. There's a nice store in Crown Heights called Essen Bench. Essen Bench, which in Yiddish means eat. It's like, it's the Jewish version of grab and go. Eat and bless God. So benching is a Yiddish word, not Hebrew. But in any event, the grace after meals is a biblical commandment to bless God after we eat. Why is it a biblical commandment to bless God after we eat? Well, blessing God before we eat is really not necessary to be a divine instruction. It comes to us automatically. It's intuitive for us to turn to God when we're hungry, when we don't have the ability and the means to provide for ourselves and for our families. But that's when we turn to God. So you don't need a biblical commandment for that. The time you need a biblical commandment is when you are saying grace after meals. Because once you're full, you're like, listen, I don't need God anymore. I'm really not right now in a place where I need to turn to God. And therefore, that's where you need the biblical commandment. That's where you know the test of your faith. If you're able to turn to God and to acknowledge the presence of God when you don't actually need God anymore. Good morning to you, Keith. Good morning, Rosa. Rosa from Wellington, I think, right? Great to see everybody. Okay, great. So one thing I'd like to tell you before we go into word number 44 of our Hebrew word diary is a very interesting custom. You know, we Jews do a lot of hand washing. When you wake up in the morning, you're supposed to wash your hands. You're supposed to have a cup. It's like a hand washing cup. It should be enough to, my American measurements aren't that great. I'm still in my South African mode, but it should be like big enough to pour 3 times on your right hand and 3 times on your left hand. So that's a cup, not like a little drinking cup of water, but like a large cup. You can buy them in all the Jewish stores. You'll see them in my house. You'll see them in the shul. It's like a large cup with 2 handles that you can sort of hold and pour 3 times on the right and 3 times on the left. So when we wake up in the morning, it's very, very important to wash each hand, starting with the right hand, alternating 3 times. So you do right and then left and right and then left and right and then left. This is how we wake up in the morning. This is how a Jew wakes up in the morning. We're actually supposed to put this washing cup right next to your bed inside of a bowl. So when you wake up out of your bed, before you even start walking, you pour 3 times on each hand. Then we do the same thing after going to the bathroom. The same thing, the same hand washing happens after going to the bathroom. It's not so much a physical cleansing of the hands as much as it is a spiritual cleansing of the hands. In fact, it's called Negelwasser, which means, in Yiddish, Negelwasser means nail water, the water of the nails, because the bad spirits within us, the evil spirits from the bathroom, there's a spirit in the bathroom. Did you know that? There's actually a spirit in the bathroom. The Kabbalah tells us that you're not supposed to have relations within 9 minutes of coming out of the bathroom. Why? Because there's a spirit in the bathroom which you do not want to be drawing down into your marital union and potentially into the soul of a child which would come out of that marital union. Interesting, right? That's what the Kabbalah says. Not supposed to have sex within 9 minutes of coming out of the bathroom because of the spirit inside of the bathroom. That's why after you go to the bathroom, you're supposed to wash your hands, just like you do when you wake up, when your soul leaves, when you're sleeping and the darkness prevails in your body, the evil spirit leaves through your fingernails. That's why you wash your fingernails, alternating when you wake up, and the same thing after the bathroom. However, there's another washing of the hands. By the way, we spoke about this in another class a long time ago, before davening, before prayer. Davening, by the way, is a Yiddish word, which means, a very interesting word, which means to calibrate. It's calibrating body and soul. That's davening. To balance the cognitive dissonance of the world that we see and the truth that we comprehend, and they're out of sync. So therefore we daven, right? We daven. Davening is calibrating. But before we daven, we're also supposed to wash our hands. But there's a very interesting washing of the hands that happens before benching, before eating, and after eating. So before we eat bread, we're supposed to wash our hands. But this time, we don't do it alternating. We do it 3 times on the right, and afterwards we do 3 times on the left. This is before bread. 3 times on the right, 3 times on the left. By the way, the washing has to be covering the entire hand in one shot. Not just your fingers, not just your palms, like just a tiny drop of water in your palms. It's supposed to sort of wash over your entire hand from the wrist all the way through to the fingertips, all the hands in one shot, like a mikveh, like a total immersion, right? What I do is I use the cup to pour an entirety. I pour 6 times, or 3 and 3. I use the cup to pour entirely over the right hand, sometimes once and then twice and then 3 times a refill, because it says in the Talmud that the more generous you are with the washing or the water of the washing of the hands before bread, the more blessing of financial prosperity you'll experience, right? Interesting stuff there. The more generous you are with the water of the washing of the hands, the more generous flow of financial prosperity you'll experience. Now, why do we wash our hands before bread? The reason for that is so that we can be ready for the coming of Mashiach. We're supposed to eat food with ritual. Certain kinds of food need to have ritual purity. I'm talking about the Kohen foods, the foods that are eaten by the priest, called the truma. In biblical times, you're supposed to donate. Take care, Lucy. I see you gotta go. In biblical times, you have to donate certain foods to the priest, and the priest can only eat those foods, the Kohen, in a state of ritual purity. So to remind us of that, when Mashiach will come, those foods will need to be eaten in a state of purity. We therefore wash our hands before bread billions of times in the past 2,000 years, so that we will be ready at a moment's notice for the coming of Mashiach. But then there's another washing of the hands, which is the point I was trying to reach to today, and that is the washing of the hands after eating bread. Before the grace after meals, before eating bread, we're supposed to do another washing of the hands, but this washing of the hands is unique. It's a washing only of the fingertips, and it's only for the men. Good morning, Dan. Nice to see you. Welcome. This washing of the hands is unique. It's only on the fingertips. In fact, you'll notice in some homes they have this like little silver laving of the hands. It's called the mayim acharonim, the after waters. After waters means waters that come after a meal. You'll notice they come in a little tiny cup, which sits on top of a little basin. Now these are waters that once you wash your fingertips, the water becomes impure, and you cannot do the grace after meals when these waters are exposed. So they design these beautiful little silver washing cups, after water cups, which are made out of silver, and the cup itself sits in the middle of the basin to the point that it actually closes the reservoir of water of the impure water. So what's up with this after water? Why do we do the after water washing? The reason for that is because we're only washing our fingertips, and it's only the men. We only wash our fingertips. Now, the Talmud says that the reason that we do that is because we don't want to blind ourselves with the salt of Sodom. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were the biblical cities that were destroyed in the times of Abraham. They were cities that were exceedingly wicked. They had rules against hospitality. Sometimes I joke it's a little bit like today's HOAs, you know. The HOAs, they have limitations about how long your guests are allowed to stay, if they're allowed to be, if they have to be related to you, if they're not allowed to be, if they're not related to you, they're not allowed to come. But in Sodom and Gomorrah, there was rules against hospitality, and they would punish people for welcoming guests into their homes. So the salt of Sodom is a reference to the biblical story when the angels came to destroy the city of Sodom. They stayed at the house of Lot. Lot was the nephew of Abraham who was living in Sodom. And Lot's wife was not exactly righteous. She asked her neighbors for salt for the guests. You know, she was acting pious. She was saying, oh, I need salt for the guests. Obviously, she was surreptitiously passing the message on that we have guests. And within minutes, a riot erupted outside of their home where they tried to take these guests because they wanted to violate them sexually. Such was their treatment of guests. And ultimately that ended in the destruction of the city of Sodom, all because of salt, because Lot's wife, the nephew of Abraham, she asked for salt from her neighbors to feed her guests. And by the way, it's very fitting that what happened was that the city of Sodom, when it was destroyed, it was turned upside down. It was turned into what is today the Dead Sea. And if you remember the story, Lot and his wife and 2 daughters who were saved by the angels, they were told not to look back at the city of Sodom because they were not worthy of seeing its destruction. They were saved by the skin of their teeth. So what happened was that the wife of Sodom, if you tell someone not to look back, not to look at a certain place, what are they going to do? What would you do if somebody told you, don't look over there? Well, what's the first thing you would do? Don't look over there. Right there, don't look there. Of course, the first thing we do is we look. So Lot's wife couldn't control herself, and she turned around, she looked, and she turned into a pillar of salt in the biblical account. And if you go to the south of the Dead Sea today, there is a structure which looks remarkably like a large woman, and it's made out of salt, and they call that large structure, they call it Eshet Lot, they call it the wife of Lot. That's the story of Salt and Lot's wife. Now, what's that got to do with the grace after meal? Because the Talmud says that we need to wash our fingertips after a meal so that we don't blind our eyes with the salt of Sodom. So that we don't blind our eyes with the salt of Sodom. Now, on a literal level, that means that we used to eat our food. People didn't really eat with a fork and knife, they ate with their fingers, and there was, I guess, salt of Sodom, maybe what you might want to call kosher salt, they were putting on their food. And if you're eating with your hands, then after the meal, you might rub your eyes, and you might blind your eyes with the salt, God forbid. So that's how we wash our fingertips. That's on a literal level, but on a deeper, more spiritual level, on a more psychological level, the reason that we wash our fingertips is because the salt of Sodom represents the inability to be hospitable to strangers. The salt of Sodom represents the lack of compassion for other people, as Lot's wife was aptly turned into a pillar of salt. After a meal, we run the risk of being incompassionate to other people. I see Mickey's been there on the drive from Dead Sea to Eilat. Yeah, it's definitely way out of the way. It's like an hour south of anywhere where we normally go to at the Dead Sea, which is the northern tip. It's like deep into the desert. So when we are full, when we are satiated, when our bills have been paid and our fridges are full and our retirement account are plump, it's very difficult to feel the compassion of another person. When we are hungry, that's when we can feel the pain of another person. But when we are warm, we don't feel the cold of another person. There's a great story of a collector, a rabbi, who was collecting on behalf of the poor. He knocked on the door of a wealthy man during a blizzard, and he came to solicit the wealthy man for tzedakah for the poor people. And he insisted that as soon as he knocked on the door, the wealthy man opened the door and he says, "Rabbi, come in quickly. There's a blizzard outside. Come in." And the rabbi said, No. I want to talk to you right here outside in the doorstep. The wealthy man didn't want to, turn down the rabbi's request. He's like, "Okay, I'll come outside, but can we hurry this up? There's a beautiful fire inside." And the rabbi says, "Look, I need to ask you for money for the poor people. There's poor people that are very cold. They have no shelter. Can you provide them with funds to help them with warming their families?" And he says, "Of course. Yeah, take the money. Let's go inside." Once they come inside, and he's given the money, the wealthy man asks the rabbi. He says, "Rabbi, why do we have to do that outside? You could just as easily have asked me for the money inside." And the rabbi says, No. Inside, when you're sitting on your warm couch in your warm living room by the fireplace, it would be difficult for you to relate to the plight of the poor people. I needed you to stand outside in the blizzard, and that's why I needed to ask you for the money, so that you can truly identify and empathize with the pain and the need of these people. And therefore you were so generous. When we are hungry, we feel the pain of other people. When we are full, we don't. And that's why we do the waters after the meal, the after waters, the mayim acharonim. The mayim acharonim, the after waters, whose purpose it is to make a ritual out of removing the insensitivity from our fingertips, out of removing the the salt of Sodom from our fingertips. And in fact, there's a beautiful verse that we read. I'm going to show it to you in the prayer book. If you turn in your prayer book to page, here, 89. So even though the actual grace after meal starts on page 90, on page 89 is where we do the washing of the fingertips. You'll notice in the second paragraph, right after the second paragraph, it says, Raise the fingertips and pass them over the lips, then recite the following. Sorry, rinse the fingertips. I'm sorry. Rinse your fingertips, pass them over your lips, and then recite the following verse. So what happens here is we say the first verse, this is the portion of a wicked man from God and the heritage assigned to him by God. This verse that we read before the washing of the fingertips comes from Job chapter 20. This is the portion of a wicked man from God and the heritage assigned to him by God. What that means is that before I've taken action to become sensitive to the poor, when I am full and they are hungry, when I am warm and they are cold, at that point, this is the portion of a wicked man from God and the heritage assigned to him by God. You recognize and acknowledge, you verbalize and affirm that I'm in a state of wickedness right now because I am insensitive naturally to tzedakah, to the needs of the poor. Then you rinse your fingertips, symbolic of the meditation of removing the divesting of the salt of insensitivity, the salt of Sodom, the salt of inhospitality, the salt of the Dead Sea and Lot's wife. And after you've done that process, you've divested in your fingers and in your mouth. You washed your mouth with that water. You just run your wet fingers over your mouth. After you've divested of that, you've now become sensitive to the plight of the poor. Now you read the next verse from Ezekiel, and he said to me, this is the table that is before the Lord. Now I'm sitting at the table of God when I have acknowledged the plight of the poor. So that, friends, summarizes a lot of the hand washing when we wake up in the morning, after the bathroom, before we daven, and the washing of the hands just before the grace after meals. And with that introduction, I wanted to just hit onto word number 44 in our Hebrew word diary. And that Hebrew word, you'll find it on page 90 in the prayer book, which is the first paragraph of the grace after meals. We're now on the second line, third word of the second line. Blessed are you, Lord, our God, King of the universe, who in his goodness provides sustenance for the entire world with grace. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, hazan et haolam, who provides sustenance for the world, kulo, all of it, b'tuvo, with his kindness, b'chein. B'chein means with kindness. Okay? B'chein. Now, the word b'chein is actually a two-letter root. The root is two letters. And the bet at the beginning of the word is a preposition. We've learned this many times already, that when you have a bet at the beginning of a word, it is not part of the root. It means in or with. Bet at the beginning of a word means in or with. So when we say that God provides sustenance for the entire world, bechein means with chein. What is chein? Chein is a very, very important word. God provides sustenance for the world, for the entire world, with chein. Now, in the English siddur over here, it translates the word chein as kindness. But I'd like to translate the word slightly differently, and that is with charm. You see, the word Chana, for example, my wife's name, Chana, and I know Chana Siegelstein is with us as well. Chana, your name, comes from the word chein, which means charm. It also means kindness. Chein means charm, chein means kindness, right? So, what a beautiful name it is. It's like charming, right? It's like charming. I think there's an English name for charm. I thought there was, maybe in a different language. But charm is a very beautiful word, right? It means kindness, it means charming. Chet and nun, it's the 8th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, chet. And then the nun is a final nun. So it kicks its leg down. It's the long nun that goes down to the bottom, as opposed to the nun, which is a flat leg. I'm just going to show you those letters here on the screen, just before I go a little deeper into the meaning of the word. So here is the first letter, the letter chet. Chet with its, looks like a chuppah, where you get married, right? A chuppah, it's a letter chet. And then the next letter, the second letter, is the letter nun on the letter that's, the letter that I'm pointing to is the long nun, is the final nun. That's what happens when you put the nun at the end of a word. It becomes an elongated letter, becoming a final nun, right? Now, let's talk about the meaning of this word. So first of all, we spoke about the name Chana. Chana means grace. It means charm. Chana of the biblical story. Chana, my wife, Chana Siegelstein. Now we know what our name means. I'm going to tell you a cute story about that in just a few moments. But just a few more meanings of the word chana, of the word chen. So you'll notice that sometimes people will say in Hebrew, if you want to thank your guests for coming to your party, if you want to sound really polished, really sophisticated, you would say to them, chen, chen, which means how charming. How much you charmed us with your presence. Chen, chen, you say that twice. People often print this like on a thank you card. They'll say, chen, chen al ishtatfutchem besimchatenu, how charming it was that you joined us for our celebration, for our joy. So that's one application of the word chen, the 44th word of our Hebrew word diary. And you'll say to someone, if you want to find favor in someone's eyes, you'll say, Matzati chen be'einav. I found favor in his eyes, or in her eyes. Matzati chen be'eineha. She found favor in my eyes. I found favor in her eyes, right? That's what it means it's a nice expression, a nice idiom of saying to find favor in someone's eyes. Now, the Talmud says something very interesting. The Talmud says about chen something fascinating. You know, I think Marty has told me this word, that he's very familiar with this word. Marty, if you're still here, I wonder how you interpret the word chen, because I think you've said it to me. It's like when you speak about Jewish character, if somebody has chen, you know, when you look at someone, she just doesn't have any Yiddish chen. Yiddish is a Yiddish word, by the way. Yiddish chen would mean like a Jewish feeling, a Jewish charm, just a Jewish feeling, right? That's when you say about someone that have Yiddish chen or they don't have Yiddish chen. You might say about the Yiddish cup that they have a Jewish head or they have a Jewish heart, would be more of a Yiddish chen. Now, the Talmud says something fascinating, that God gave humanity a gift to help us survive this difficult world. What's that gift that God gave us? The gift that God gave us was that the place that you live will be charming to you, and the wife that you marry will be charming to you. In other words, a person loves the place where they live by nature, and a person falls in love with the wife that he lives with. Chen makom al yoshveha. The grace of a place is upon its residents. And chen isha al ba'ala, the grace of a woman is upon her husband. Can you imagine if we wouldn't get it, if a man and woman lived together and they didn't like each other? It would be very, very difficult. God sort of pulled the wool over our eyes, that when you live with a woman, you just become enamored by her charm. It's a beautiful nature that God invested in this world, that we tend to fall in love with the woman that we marry. Chen isha al baila, the grace of a woman is extended upon her husband. Chen makom al yoshveha, and the grace of a place is extended to its residents. So we tend to love the place that we live. We sit in Palm Beach Gardens all the time. People walk around with little billboards on their shirts, this is where I live. I live in Palm Beach Gardens, like the little country club, or I live in some other country club, right? And we love to parade it or to market it, to advertise it to the world. This is where I live, right? Where we live, a man's home is his castle, right? I see Marty saying it's Yiddish tam. Maybe that's the word that I was thinking of. Yiddish tam is actually the word that I said at the beginning of this class when I was talking about the word reason. The word tam is logic, and tam also means taste. I explained that at the very beginning of this class. Maybe that's the word that I was referring to. But Yiddish chen is a very beautiful expression to adopt into your lexicon. When you say about someone, it's such a Yiddish chen, there's such a Yiddish grace, right? It's a beautiful, beautiful word to be incorporated. So chen makom al yoshveha is a beautiful teaching from the Talmud, that the grace of a place is upon its residents and the grace of a woman is upon her husband. Now, I'd like to just conclude with a quick story that happened to my wife. Oh, by the way, no, before that, it says in Proverbs, we said every Friday night when we sing the Woman of Valor, Woman of Valor, who will find? At the very end of the Woman of Valor, after going through all the attributes of the woman, King Solomon, this is the eulogy of Abraham, what he said for his wife, Sarah. That's the woman of valor. It's the psalm that we sing on a Friday night. We sing it to our wives and our women in our lives to thank them for all the beauty that they bring to our lives. And it's actually originally the eulogy that Abraham said for his wife, Sarah. At the very end, it says, Sheker achein. Grace is false. The Hevel HaYofi, and beauty is nothingness. Isha yirat Hashem titalal, a woman who is in awe of God, she will be praised. That's interesting. Now, King Solomon wrote this down in the book of Proverbs, which he wrote. Sheker achein, he says that grace is false. Isn't that interesting? Don't get seduced by charm and by beauty, because they're vanity and nothingness. It is awe of God that is truthful, that is long lasting. Now, I want to use this verse to explain a very similar word to chen, which means free. The word chinam. When something is free, worth 0, it's chinam. Chet, yud, nun, mem. The root is it's basically the same root as chen. The root of chinam, of 0, the root of free, is chen. Why would it be that the root of free is the same root as grace and charm? Because I want to suggest that the reason that the word free in Hebrew is chinam, is grace, is because of King Solomon. King Solomon said, Sheker achein vehevel hayofi. Chen is a lie. It's false. Essence, character, is a woman in awe of God. Don't be fooled. So maybe this grace is not anything tangible. It's nice to have it in addition to character, but it cannot be the replacement of character. So that's in my interpretation of the connection between chen, charm and kindness, and chinam, which is free, which is 0, which is worthless. Because at the end of the day, if all that you're bringing to the table is your charm, you're just oozing with charisma, but you're really void of content. That's useless. That's what King Solomon says. I'd like to just conclude with the charming story that happened to my wife and I when we went down to Cape Town. So I'm from South Africa, but I never lived in Cape Town. My parents lived in Cape Town before I was born. And my father was the rabbi of the Muizenberg shul. The shul in Muizenberg. There were so many Jews in Muizenberg in the 70s that they used to call it Jewsenberg. Today, there's still a little shul over there. And on our honeymoon, my wife and I stayed in a place called Fishhook. Fishhook is a beautiful beach in Afrikaans. It means the fish corner. It's this beautiful bay. We had like a bungalow on the beach, and that's where we stayed for our honeymoon. We had a beautiful time over there. In fact, a week after we were there, we found out that a woman was eaten whole by a great white shark in Fishhook. So thank God we left in time. But it is the most beautiful place in the world. This beautiful bay, turquoise waters, sandy white beaches, beautiful mountains. The weather is magnificent, just beautiful. So we walked on Shabbat morning from Fishhook about an hour. I was wearing my talis, and my wife and I, we walked all the way from Fishhook to Muizenberg, to the shul where my parents were many years before I was born. We get to Muizenberg, and this beautiful shul. I think it was very small, and the congregation was very small. They maybe had 20 people. I think 15 of them were part of the choir on the bima. And there were 5 people in the congregation. Together, we had a very, very charming minyan. After the service, we had some other interesting stories that happened to us over there. One of the stories was the non-Jewish caretaker, the Shabbos guy. The black person who is the superintendent, is the caretaker of the synagogue. He came over to my wife and I, and he was very curious to know the name of my wife. Why? I said, her name is Chana. Why do you need to know? He said, because he's been the caretaker of the Muizenberg shul for many years, since the early 70s, and he very well remembers my parents. In fact, he remembers my parents so well. Why? Because he has only daughters, and all of his daughters were named after the Rebbitzins of the Muizenberg shul. So my mother's name is Hadassah, One of his daughters, her name is Hadassah. He named all of his daughters after the Rebbitzins of the shul. I think that's really nice, you know. They must have been good role models for him. So all the Rebbitzins that served at the shul were the names that were given to his daughters. But now, one of his daughters was soon to give birth. And he thinks that it's going to be a girl. And if it's going to be a girl, he's run out of Rebbitzin names. So he wants to know the name of my wife. So I said, it's Chana. So he says, Chala? And we laughed and we said, no, not Chala. Chana. And he said again, Chala? And we said, no, it's not Chala. Chala is the bread that we eat on Shabbos. It's Chana. I guess, it was too much Hebrew for him to know Chala, which of course he would prepare every Shabbat for the congregation. And Chana, which is the name of my wife. And he kept on confusing Chana and Chala. Eventually we just said, yeah, you know what? If you want it to be Chala, it's fine. Keep it Chala. So we always joke that if you ever bump into a black woman in South Africa from Cape Town, and her name is Chala, then you should know that she's named after my wife, after Chana. So that's today's word. It's word number 44, friends. On our Hebrew word diary, I encourage you to take the roots, write it, Chet Nun, on the front of your Hebrew word diary, and write in the back of it grace and kindness, so that you know that every time you see this root, you'll know that we're talking about Hebrew word number 44 in our Hebrew word diaries. And every time you see this word, you'll know the meaning of the word. You'll know how to read it. You'll know the meaning of the word, and you'll have what to think about when we meditate on the deeper meaning that chen is actually nothing, right? And when we say in the grace after meals, we bless you, Lord, our God, God of the universe, who provides for the needs of all of humanity, all of the world, with chen, with grace, and with kindness. That means to say that God treats us with respect. He treats us with kindness. He doesn't just throw it at us. He does it with kindness. Kindness on its own, charm on its own is nothing. But maybe that's why they translated it not as charm, but as kindness in the Siddur, because it wouldn't help us much to know that God is giving us our livelihood with charm. We wanted to give it to us with kindness, and that's why they gave that interpretation of the word. In any event, friends, this marks the conclusion of today's Torah study. Today's Thursday, and I'd like to remind you that tonight at 8 o'clock we have a special class on the coming of Mashiach. It's happening. It's imminent. Mashiach is coming. Let me tell you, the world, the way we know it, just cannot continue the way it is. We are definitely in biblical times, in the times of the messianic prophecies. Mashiach is coming, and be prepared. We as Americans, we are sophisticated human beings. We like to prepare. We like to know what's coming. We like to know where we're going on vacation, how to dress, what to wear. We want to know what's going to be and where we go at our parties, at our events. We want to know what the weather is going to be like tomorrow. And we want to know if we have enough money for retirement. So the same goes for the coming of Mashiach. It's happening. We've been waiting for this for almost 2,000 years. It's happening any day now, hopefully today. I believe in perfect faith in the coming of Mashiach. And though he may tarry, I wait is coming every day. This is the call of our ancestors for the past 2,000 years. But all the biblical signs are coming to fruition today. Let's make sure that we are prepared, that we know what's coming with the coming of Mashiach. So join me tonight at 8 o'clock at facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. That's facebook.com/Jewish Gardens for the first of 5 classes on the coming of Mashiach. Thank you very much, everybody. Shalom. Have a wonderful day. It was wonderful seeing everybody. Thank you very much.